Good afternoon, everyone who are present in this hall and who watches us online. We start our work at the Ukraine Crisis Media Center, and the first event is illustrative growth, what really means Ukraine's 76th place in doing business rating. Our guests are Kateryna Hlazkova, the Executive Director of the Union of Ukrainian Entrepreneurs, and Andrii, Yerashov, Co-Chairman of the Committee of the Entrepreneurship Development of the Union of Ukrainian Entrepreneurs. Welcome. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. Today we are going to speak about the results of the rating that was published by the World Bank, and on Tuesday they published the results of Doing Business 2018, and this year Ukraine advanced 4 positions up, and whether it is a good result for Ukraine. And this is a very important issue because Ukraine now is moving slowly in this rating. Last year, we had a press conference in this hall devoted to this topic, and we said that Ukraine really needs sharp moving up because this rating is really important. And this rating shows how Ukraine looks in the eyes of investors in the world. And if we are lower than 30th place, we do not compete with those countries who can get foreign investment. So what happened this year? First of all, there was an increase in the indicator of getting permits for construction permits, 105 positions up. And now we are going to speak about more detail why we succeeded on this. And there's also tax payment, 41 position up due to the decrease of single social contribution. This happened, and also we have some falling. This concerns, first of all, registration of business, where Ukraine went up 32 positions down. Registration of property -1 position, and getting credit -9. 76 position in the rating is not a good place for Ukraine. It means that it is not easy to do business in Ukraine, and Ukraine is not attractive for domestic and foreign investors. The important thing I want to draw attention to is that these methodologies and ratings, they are based on the Kiev region data, and the positions that go up in the component of getting permit for construction, it relates to Kiev, where the tax of share was decreased, and then city council took decision to get decreasing coefficient and decrease this to 2%. So this provided this breakthrough, and Andrii will go into more detail about it, and we, with our colleagues this autumn, we created rating based on this rating, regional rating of doing business, to look at other regions and the situation there. And the situation in the regions is more difficult for carrying out business in Ukraine. And we, as the Union of Ukrainian Entrepreneurs, we represent more than 500 companies, independent business, that do not have any connections with the politicians and oligarchs. These are people who created their business from the start. They work daily, they pay taxes, they create employment, and we survey the business, and the business do not see improvements for doing business, and the ease of doing business is still too low in Ukraine. And we may say about the decrease of tax burden, but this year there is a new issue that is not really new, but there is a pressure on business from the law enforcers, and we told about it at the meeting with the president, when the president met with the business, and also the Prime Minister and the Prosecutor General was present at that meeting. We spoke about these issues. After this, General Prosecutor's Office, Yuri Lutsenko, Prosecutor General, signed a letter to Prosecutor's Office to stop these mask shows and ungrounded participation of special forces, and also signed a letter that there should be lawyers on site and there should be video registration of searches, and the search and confiscation of the documents should start only after the company refused to provide this list of documents. After this, the law enforcement officers can be included in this case. So also we called on to join to this letter and to create an analogy document in other law enforcement structures, and we sent such letters to SBU of Ukraine, to National Police, and we proposed officially to them to introduce such practice that was started by the Prosecutor's General Office in order to send such letters to these enforcement bodies on this. About investment, when we are saying about the need of investment in Ukraine, according to calculations of the expert, according to the calculations of the Institute of the Future, up to 2030, so for the next 10 years, Ukraine will need 270 billion of investment. When we say about slow movement in doing business rating, we cannot even speak about such big figures. So Ukraine does not participate in this competition for world investment. When foreign investors, they don't even see Ukraine as it is, that is at the 76th place. So several words about the rating. Next slide, please. Previous slide. I would like to say about these three leading countries, New Zealand, Singapore, and Denmark. New Zealand and Denmark for the third year take leading positions in the rating. And what is important to understand about the rating, that Ukraine, it makes some small steps, +3, +5 positions, but the rest of the countries, they are not standing, they are moving as well. So in order to stay on one place, we should move fast, and to create a great breakthrough up to the top of this rating, we should work much more, and we should implement reforms in Ukraine. And I would like to stop at that, and I would like to give the floor to Andrii, and he will tell about components in more detail. Good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. I would like to tell about why Ukraine went up, due to which factors. These are three components. The first one is taxation, and we remember that the single social contribution was decreased in 2015. It was introduced 2016, and then now it is taken into account into the rating due to the peculiarities of calculation according to this indicator. Also, except that this single social contribution was decreased, they liquidated such contribution from this workers' wages. This was 3.6%, and administering became easier for accountants, and it influenced the number of hours. It was previously 100 hours, and now it is 92 hours spent on this activity. About the insolvency resolution, unfortunately, in Ukraine, nothing serious was done in this area. The draft law that was developed has been developing, and they do not vote it in the Supreme Council, even in the first reading. The only thing is that those who were surveyed, they indicated that it became easier to return money than it was done previously. If we look at the rating, from $1 that was invested in some business that went bankrupt, only 8.9 cents go back to the creditor. If we look at Japan, this is the leader in this indicator, they, from $1, they return 29.6. So this is the big difference. 92.6. So Ukraine had 8.4%. So we improved a little bit, and we got some positive result in this. And about the permits for construction, the decision of the Kiev City Council, they adopted the new order, and they established, first of all, this is clear procedure of contracts and paying share participation amount. And the Kiev City Council took decision that for 2017 they made this discount for those who will pay share participation, and they pay only 2% for residential or non-residential premises. And next year there will be the next rating produced, and if Kiev City Council won't adopt or won't cancel this share participation in Kiev, or as it is done in practice in Mariupol, where share participation is 1 hryvnia for one facility that was built. So Ukraine will lose in this, because today that what was adopted by the Supreme Council, this is the simplification concerning construction. It won't influence that much that the share contribution influenced and the share participation influenced. So this is the problem. So I would like to draw your attention to the fact that what drew us down. So those who were surveyed, they said that there is a sharp for Ukraine for 3 or 4 years. There was improvement of registering in the sphere of registering the business, but in Ukraine there are some new preventive mechanisms. When the company employs new employee, they should provide information to the authorities that they employed this person, and this reflected in the rating, and they added 2 more procedures in this indicator. And the registration of business, this is the easiest indicator, in which all the countries, they are really close to each other. And so if we, and we saw that we have, we had 52nd place, and we fell from the place 20, we fell to the 52nd place. So each year we added 1 position up. This is in the sphere of getting credits, but here the situation is a little bit different. We do not do anything there, and that's why we got the -9 position. So we were at position 20, and now we are at 9, and previously so we didn't do anything in this sector. And in the rating there are small changes in methodology, but in Ukraine in 2013 and 2014, when the methodology was changed, we went up 30 ranks in the overall rating. And now this changes in methodology influenced worse on Ukraine. And here we have place 86 in the rating of 2015. It was published that we were on the place 93, And then the methodology was reviewed, and when they published 2016, they corrected the rating of the 2015 according to the new methodology, and we were placed on 86. And what should we do? There is such a bill, and it is lying in the Supreme Council. This is the number of draft laws that were developed, and the part of this draft laws, they were drafted with the big participation of experts, and the Cabinet of Ministers and the government on their behalf, they introduced these draft laws to the Supreme Council, but unfortunately the Supreme Council, as of today, according to several draft laws, some of them went through first reading. This is 3665 on mediation, and also there are draft law 3132G, so this draft law is not moving properly through the council, and other draft laws, they only went through the committees, relevant committees, and maybe you know that 4 draft laws that were introduced recently by the Cabinet of Ministers, 6540, 6541, 6543, they went through the committees, but we do not know whether they will be introduced for voting. We don't know about it. So we hope that this will be some drive for the government, for the president, for the Supreme Council. They should see that Ukraine is falling, and practically this is falling. And among the countries that surround us, so these countries are not near us in this rating. They are all far, far away from us in this rating. And we want Ukraine to be in top 20. We want us to be in top 20, so we should really aim high. So in the strategy of President 2020, Ukraine should enter the top 20 countries, and the adoption of the draft laws that were published, this will provide us with the proper changes and going up in this rating. So about taxation, we went up, but as of today, together with the Ministry of Finance, there was a draft law developed on the outgoing capital. And if we look at this rating, this will be an additional plus for Ukraine, and for business, this tax will make Ukraine competitive, because this will provide some stimulus. And what is published by the government, they state about bigger losses of the budget, and the experts that carried out the independent assessment, they say about smaller losses, but everyone understands that the growth of GDP due to this tax will be at the level of 3 or 4%, no matter what will happen after this with the regulation. And for business, for small business, this is a good option. For big business, this tax by today's they can reduce the tax, but this is for capitalization of their company, and we will see what this company worth and what they are ready to invest. So if they do not withdraw the money, if they why should you pay to the state if you can open new plant, or you can expand your production facilities? And also as of today, and I believe other ministries also will join this, will join us as experts, and they asked us to meet with the ministers who are ready to do something in order that Ukraine went up in the rating of doing business next year. And we really contribute our efforts into this. And what I want to say is, when experts come from Washington, those who get collect data, who specify some data, we say about the problems for the business, and the bright example, Ukraine canceled seals in 2015, but as of today, the production of these seals for business, it is still there. And there were some changes to legislation, and they established administrative responsibility who will demand the use of seals. But in bank, they demand the use of seals. And we see this in the rating. So practically, the law establishes that business may not use these seals, but in fact, they use them. And from them, it is required that they use these seals, and we have this in this rating. And also, I would like to say about registration of property. This is an interesting indicator. This is one of the indicators where we understand that monopolies they are not only in utility sector. When we look at this indicator, it looks that in order to provide some land plots, they should get expert assessment, but legislation does not provide for this. But the notaries, they demand this, and we understand why. Also, private notaries, they take the duty that they shouldn't take, but they demand it, and business pays. And that's why we get such results. And the Ministry of Justice, from their side, they provided explanation, and the Ministry of Economy also raised the issue about cancellation of the order of the President, by which they obliged the private notaries to get the fees not less than it is established for state notaries, but at the same time, in the law, it is said that the price is negotiable, and that's why we face such a situation when the notaries, without any grounds, demand the payment and the documents that they shouldn't demand. And we try to explain to experts from doing business, but this is the violation of legislation by notaries, but it doesn't help. They say that if it is required from you, we reflect it, and in this way, we won't improve. So it shows that the rating is only the opportunity to once again objectively see the situation that is ongoing in Ukraine. This is the motivation to see where we fall and what reforms are needed. And we said that ease of doing business, this is sometimes the decision on paper, but in reality, some mechanisms do not work, and business feels this. And due to this rating, once again, we can see objective situation and come to some conclusions and to work in order to change the situation. That's why we prepared these draft laws, and we also want to the list of these draft laws, and we will provide this list of draft laws to you in order that you as journalists can also contribute, and we communicate at the highest level. We spoke about draft law 6540, and we want that these draft laws, that they will be in the focus of the attention. And these draft laws, they are not politically motivated, and there are no obstacles that would be in the parliament. People just need to focus on them. There should be the day of deregulation that we've discussed with the representatives of the highest echelon of power, and we said that in the parliament there should be a day devoted to draft laws that are needed to promote these reforms, and the business should feel that it became easier to carry out business in Ukraine.
And all this, well, of course, will be reflected in the rating themselves. That Ukraine will start going up. Your questions, please. Andrii Megel, Institute of Liberalism. My question is that business will become doing easier, or we will be up in the rating. Businesses will feel better, will do easily. Then this would be reflected in the doing business index. If you are not to pass some procedures, for example, in Uzbekistan, for which is on 74th place, which is better than Ukraine. They're moving up in the indicator
Taxation.
of taxation. They have all reporting, tax reporting and payments in electronic form, and we experience problems. They spend 32 hours for administering taxes, and in our country 92 hours. And this is the survey. The survey is unbiased. The thing is that responders of the survey, they are businesses operating in Ukraine, and on the secondly, they are companies which service the business, and they say how much time the outsourcing accountants spend for filling reporting forms and pay taxes. The list of laws you have mentioned several times. Can you list them now? Yes, I can. I remember them. This is important. The first 66, 65 on mediation, then the draft law 65, 40, 65, 41, 65. 43. This is a big draft law which was divided into 3 parts because some amendments shall be introduced in the tax code, in the customs code. Draft law 4776, 4777, they are draft laws introducing into Ukraine of authorized economic operators. This is the best practice, and we do not understand why it does not move. When on these bills, the Yuzhanin's committee gave negative opinion. When it was issued, it was just sent to the European Union. It was resent so that they understand how we work, and the EU provided feedback. They addressed the committee with the question why they think that this draft law should not be adopted. Returning back to 2015, when these draft laws were drafted, they were drafted taking into consideration the customs code adopted. to be introduced in May next year. So everything is harmonized with this customs code, in this customs code with the EU. And good news that the committee have improved a little bit the draft law. After these minor amendments, this bill will be submitted again for voting. And there is also Bill 3132 regulating bankruptcy procedures in Ukraine. The changes will be to the law on bankruptcy and some other legislative acts, so that the best practices of the EU are introduced. This draft law was developed by many experts, including National Association of Banks of Ukraine. They have approved it because there were many debates. What we have now, there is a draft law which is in the Verkhovna Rada, but there is no impetus from the Verkhovna Rada and from the government to move further. And draft law 6017, it is also very important, and 1710 is a draft law for one window approach to be introduced everywhere. Resolution of the cabinet is a regulatory document, and there are many laws and legislations which should have been amended. This draft law launch one window in full scope, so that all bodies are covered. Those executive authorities which are not covered by current legislation, these bodies, they say that they will inspect goods because they do not have legislative possibility to take part in this one window procedure, to take submitted information and issue permits for the goods to pass customs fast. One specifying question: in your opinion, what is the likelihood that the next year's rating, what is the probability, what is the likelihood that these laws are in place by the time of compiling the next doing business rating? Some of these bills, they are very young, some of them are several years old. For example, 64, 41 and 65, 42, they have already been reviewed, reincarnated. This is their reincarnation. 2.5 years old draft laws, their adoption could be possible only if MPs understand that doing business rating will not improve otherwise. The draft laws which will be taken into account, the draft law 76, it would be taken into account in 2019, not the next year, but later. The second bill on responsibility for demanding the seal from legal entities, but the story is 50-50. We have been always trying to remove the seals. This should be shown in the ratings, but this is our third attempt. For us not to then on construction there will be some changes in the rating of 2019 thanks to certain criteria. Our understanding that Ukraine will grow in the rating against this indicator, but one indicator, unfortunately, won't influence the whole rating. If some indicator will be up by 2 points, this would be the fall in the total rating. Generalizing your question, it is not easy to work with the Verkhovna Rada. This is why we are here today. We have been working with this list not for 1 year, but longer, and we call on business associations, profile associations, public and journalists, so that we remind MPs that this is not all. These draft laws, they are already submitted to Verkhovna Rada, and they may be of influence somewhat on doing business rating, but investment attractiveness is also protection of investors, minority investors, and judicial reform and protection of ownership right. This is the wide, broad issue which needs lots of efforts in Ukraine, but these laws which are already submitted to the Verkhovna Rada pending and waiting for voting, I call on our MPs to vote for them, and here the draft law on the tax on moved out capital, it is the responsibility of the cabinet. By July 1st, this law should have already been adopted, but it is still in some ministries waiting for approval. Igor Konevsky, news agency, can you show us the leaders in the rating? The Kiev Council, what is the weight factor of construction permits, dealing with construction permits, and if there is no decision adopted by the Kiev Council on share participation change, what would then be our position? By time, we are rather competitive comparing with other economies, but this share participation, it moves us down because of the cost, not of the time. I know that it consists of 10 indicators. Is it a weighty indicator or so-so? We can't say that it weighs much. It is of average weight. Heavy indicators, important indicators are investors. We can't assess it this way. Of course, if we we will be the first after the being 35, then we will grow in the rating. If by one indicator we change our position as a country, as an economy, there is a calculator for simulation modeling. If we change by 10 positions for the national position, this would mean a change by 2 points. Still it is subjective. This indicator looks not bad for our country because the rating does not cover corruption component. This rating look onto the legislation and regulatory framework. If there is no Kiev Council decision made, then we would be down by 2 positions. When this decision was taken, it was the end of October or November. I took part in the development. I was a member of the work group. Together with deputies of Kiev Council, I would like to mention Olga Baletska. She was a driver. We drafted this new procedure together. We presented it everywhere so that we cover maximum stakeholders. When we raise the issue what interferes with construction companies, we understood that there is a problem somewhere. Construction companies said we can't make contracts because even if you have gathered all documents and you are ready to pay but there are conditions when you cannot make contracts. This encourage to give bribes to negotiate. Then nobody, foreign investors, could hardly understand what does cash payment mean. They want to work in the fair manner. And now many Ukrainian companies follow the fair way of doing business. When this procedure was introduced from January 1st this year, I tried to find out. So during the first 6 months, twice more contracts were made. Even I'd like to add this position is that there was also the reducing factor used. If it is not prolonged, then we will fall again, both under this indicator and in total. We should understand this. One more question, final question. Yes, Ukraine was said, Ukrainian News Agency, I understand that you are not the World Bank, but if these laws are adopted, what would be then the position of Ukraine? Have you already talked to the parliament on the deregulation issues? When they will adopt the package this year or in summer? When the day of regulation would be celebrated? The faster the better. We are ready to consult. The decision was not made on the date of this celebration. This is our position, but not that of parliamentarians. What is your question? I'd like to get to know how fast we should have this day, adopt these laws, any laws which are of impact on ease of doing business, you know the answer. They should be passed as soon as possible. As soon as the parliament adopts these laws, November 7th would be the right day, for example. If these draft laws are passed, we are not the World Bank, but we will gain about 40 positions. We will move up by 40 positions approximately. This is not full deregulation. In some cases, this is just good regulation, adequate European regulation. We are not the only country in this rating. Other economies are doing something too. The toughest competition is in the first dozen of the countries. We live in competitive environment. This is not like Ukraine has adopted something and we go up. Other countries also are moving up. The rating covers 190 countries. Our position is rather low, so we should change many things. And those who are in the first 20, for them, even the slight improvement, for example, as concerns registration, they are not talking about this, but about hours. You understand, just fine-tuning of regulation may mean becoming better than others, but for our country, 76 position, you understand yourself that nobody, no investor will go further than 50th page in the search. Yes, China is lower than we are, but the countries, neighboring countries, they are higher in the rating. Ukraine has improved its positions in the rating thanks to the three things. The first is falling of incomes per capita, because this is what is also counted for in the rating. The cost of connecting to power networks, it was 625 and it became 555 thanks to the indicator taking account of income per capita. How much? It depends on amount of incomes of individuals, and you know that in China the income per capita is higher. China is on the lower position, but we should focus attention on the best practices. Ukraine in all ratings is lower than other countries neighboring us. We should understand this. Not so long ago, the Fitch published a risk rating of countries, and we have the rating B- status. So this is worse than in comparative neighboring economies. Thank you. The final question. Marina Gaiduk, Muzikantuk. The change in the rating of Ukraine, does it give a chance for international insurance companies to open to us service contracts between foreign economic activity entities, because these services have been closed. Improvement in the rating is a signal not only for insurance companies abroad, but for any investor who are ready to work in Ukraine. Our dramatic rise will give us any investor, because today Ukraine is a country just asking investors to come here, while investors do not understand what for they should go to Ukraine. Our practices are not good. There are many situations when very open businesses, transparent businesses, they are inspected by prosecutors and law enforcement offices, and until we have such mask shows in the country, the investment would not go to our country, and our economic situation would not improve. I'd like to finalize. To sum up, this rating is not the answer to all questions. This is the indicator to compare Ukraine with comparative economies, so that we can see how we compete for labor force and how other. And we call on the parliament to adopt the draft laws which are needed, so that we improve the conditions for businesses in Ukraine.